Hi, welcome to Health and Information for August of 2012. I'm Dr. James Bissland. Over the last year, we've put together programs to provide you with a good amount of information, a lot of it healthcare related, some of it chiropractic related, some of it not. We've had our attorney, Lloyd Benedict, has been on talking about legal issues. We had Jerry Cooper on talking about things for aiding the visually and impaired and deaf community. This month we're going to focus on a treatment protocol that's relatively new to chiropractic healthcare and healthcare in general, a little older technology for the veterinary field, and that is the use of light therapy. And for just years and years and years and hundreds of years, they've known the power of the healing of light, but we've never really got into it like we have in the last, let's say, 30 years. My guest today is a gentleman who has developed light therapy, pretty much a pioneer in light therapy, and I'm going to basically let him go over and give you the history of the light therapy. Then we're going to talk about the healing effects, and we're going to talk about specific frequencies. So I'd like to introduce you to and welcome to our program Mr. Dan Parris. And welcome to the program.
Thank you, Dr. Bissland.
Before we get started on your history, tell us a little bit about you and what got you into doing this type of work.
Well, my background is in engineering and physics, and I was fortunate to, from almost the beginning of my career, work in research and development, which exposed me to a lot of varied scientific information and new technology. And it was while in this career that I met your dad, and he was studying acupuncture at the time.
That's right.
And so I have known you for almost as long as you've been.
Just about.
And I'll probably go ahead and call you James rather than Dr. Bissland, because that's the familiar term that I've known you by over the years, and I'd slip up and do it anyway, so we'll just make it official.
That's all right.
Yeah, your dad was studying acupuncture, and the unique situation was the study group he was with only had one instrument that they were sharing and locating and stimulating acupuncture points. And he knew my background, and he asked me if I could make him a similar instrument. And I said I sure could. And I did. Wound up making one for about everyone in the study group. And from there it expanded as he went on to teach that, and among others, that I built units for many years just on a part-time basis and as a garage project. As the technology became more apparent and in greater use, it even spread out nationwide. During that time, I also was introduced to auricular acupuncture, auricular therapy, as your dad got into it. And the same thing happened with the instrumentation that was originated in France, and we made our own version. So that thus began the beginnings of my exposure to acupuncture and acupuncture instrumentation. One of the groups that I manufactured for was the Acupuncture Society of America. And
that was with Dr. Richard Yenny.
Dr. Richard Yenny, yes.
And Dr. Yenny's been on our program.
Oh, yeah, very good. And Dr. Yenny called me one day and said they're using lasers to stimulate acupuncture points in Europe. And he said, as the rules are in the United States and the laws in many states, that an acupuncture or a chiropractor could not penetrate the skin with a needle, so they had to use non-needle acupuncture, and wanted to know if I could produce a laser for use with acupuncture. And I gathered some information and made him one, And at the same time, I had been introduced to Dr. Nogier in France, who was the father of auricular therapy.
Right.
And this opened up a whole new avenue, a whole new field for me in the use of acupuncture, and how it broadened into even greater potential with the use of lasers, which we'll also say was light therapy, but at the time laser was the thing of the day, and it was new. It was a way of getting a lot of energy in a small area, and so we pursued that. And at that time, it was sold only through Dr. Yenny and some other specialized places. And this was in 1974 and 1975. So not only were we pioneers, the company that I later formed was CEFCO Incorporated, and not only were pioneers in electroacupuncture, but also in laser therapy. While we may not have been the first with electroacupuncture, we were certainly among the first, and we were the first with laser therapy in the United States, and the use of laser light not only to stimulate acupuncture points, but to use for other purposes which at the time we could do. The next big jump in the field was Dr. Yenny was having laser acupuncture seminars, and when he called me to place an order, he said he'd sold 2 of them at his seminar to veterinarians. And I thought, veterinarians, animals, and acupuncture? It didn't even dawn on me. Now you have to realize this too. I was not totally convinced that there was really anything to acupuncture. As your dad once said, I was disgustingly healthy. So he couldn't practice on me, and I couldn't experience what was happening.
And that's just about true still to this day.
And so I had to look into this. So I got the name of the veterinarians, called one of them up, and who happened to be Dr. Marvin Kane, who is known as the father of veterinary acupuncture in the United States. He studied in China, and he had helped to form the International Veterinary Acupuncture Society. Well, after I talked with him, I found out that he was using it not just for acupuncture points, but because it had the Nogier frequencies, he was using it to heal various problems with horses, and was being very successful at it. So I thought, oh, here is another outlet, and one which was a lot at this time. This was in 1978, and the FDA was getting rather cautious about the use of laser in human market. This was before the device laws come into effect.
Right.
And so this gave a good avenue for research in the animal field. And so this is where we went to next and investigated it. We went to the 3rd conference, the International Veterinary Acupuncture Society, or their Congress, which was in 1978, and we become very intrigued with the people and the services that they were performing, and their readiness to look at new fields, and their eagerness to be able to do something better for the animals which is a unique problem to begin with because they can't tell you what's wrong with them.
That's right, they can't.
So they can only go by the results of the animal, how they feel and what they're doing themselves and their performance. And there wasn't any denying the difference in the performance with acupuncture, laser acupuncture, and the use of lasers in healing various problems of that the equine industry had at that time. And it was, because of its cost, was almost exclusively used in the equine industry and horse racing. The parallel to this, the UCLA Harbor Medical Center in California did some research using two types of lasers. The helium neon laser, which is produces a red light, and infrared lasers, which are invisible light, but several part quite a bit in the light spectrum. One was at 880 nanometers, or 904 nanometers, pardon me. The solid state infrared lasers were 904 nanometer wavelength. The helium neons were at 632.8 nanometers. But they were getting similar results in studies that they had made on collagen and fibroblast replication in cell level studies. So my thoughts were, what's magic about laser? Laser is a collimated beam of monochromatic light, or in other words, of one wavelength, one specific wavelength. And here they were using lasers, and many were saying it was the wavelength of the light that was making things effective. And so if we had two different lasers that far apart in spectrum, what was magic about lasers? And they were quite expensive. The lasers at that time, they were helium neon gas lasers. The laser tubes were quite expensive, and they could cover only a small area. And here we are with wanting to cover a large area with an adequate amount of energy to induce healing and to induce an effect that would create healing. And to cover a larger area caused us to be even more expensive. In fact, the first broadhead infrared laser system cost more than the control unit itself did. And so that was the beginning of what we come up with and patented, the infrared laser system.
When we come back, we're going to discuss the healing effects of light, how the light does heal in the body, and then we'll get into a little bit of the frequencies of Dr. Paul Noget and a little bit more on him, and we'll be back right after this.
Are you in pain? Then meet the doctor. Neck pain, headaches? Meet the doctor. Low back and leg pain? Meet the doctor. Arm, shoulder, and hand pain? Carpal tunnel syndrome? Meet the doctor. Injured in an auto accident? Meet Dr. James Bissland at Bissland Chiropractic, where you can get your first visit free this month. Call Bissland Chiropractic at 838-4252. Bissland Chiropractic.
Where were you when the lights went out? Who did you call and when you gave them a shout? Did they pick up the phone? Did you get a machine? Or some front office drone? You know what I mean. You want to talk to somebody who knows what they're talking about. So call Marie now. Electricians with a mission will get you connected. We're Marie Electric.
Hi, this is Larry Murray with Murray Electric. We appreciate your business and we don't take you for granted. While nobody likes to have electrical problems, we want you to know that we will be here for you when you do need an electrician. And remember, you don't get phone shuffle when you call Murray Electric. because we have a real live electrician that answers the telephone. Remember, if you're in a hurry, call Murray, 918-835-9605. 918-835-9605.
We'll get you connected with Murray Electric.
Well, welcome back to Health and Information. I'm Dr. James Bissland, and this is August of 2012. A couple things I wanted to mention before we continue on our regular program. Next month's program, we're going to be discussing the Supreme Court ruling on Obamacare, and we are scheduled to have Lieutenant Commander Jim Bridenstine as our guest. Many of you know he ran a race for the Republican nomination for the 1st Congressional District here in Oklahoma in the Tulsa area against Congressman John Sullivan, and Mr. Bridenstine did win that election. So he will be here talking about health care reform, Obamacare, what his vision is, and what the conservative platform is for health care reform. Getting back to our topic of this program, we're talking about the healing effects of light. And my guest, Dan Parris, is with us. He's an innovator, developer. I don't know if inventor would be an appropriate term, but I think it would be, of light therapy. And during this segment, we're going to focus primarily on how light heals, the power of the light, and then we're going to get into the specific Noget frequencies. And we talked about Dr. Paul Noget a few minutes ago. We'll get into him in the next segment. So Danny, tell us a little bit of the reason. What happens when light interacts with the body and lets it heal?
Okay.
Promotes healing.
Yes. You mentioned inventor. I am the holder of 2 patents with the latest, what we properly called laser therapy, LACER, an acronym for light activated cellular energy resonance.
Okay.
This is one of the things we'll get into later, but we all know how important light is. And as Dr. John Ott said in his book on light and health, we need a balanced diet of light just like we need a balanced diet of food. And we've found over the years how important that is. We've been known the healing powers of light for years. It's a primitive thing that we've always had, so it then became important whether we knew it or not. We are looking at things that it's hard to realize that primitive man did understand somewhat. But as we advanced, we become more aware of the healing properties of light, how it, one of the first things that come along was the rickets. They found out that you needed light to heal what they call the rickets disease. Jaundice was healed by light. Then we found out that light actually creates within the body's vitamin D. And so there's many aspects that we need to realize that we're not even aware of. But when we get down to the properties that we know of now, that where light heals in the body is even more intricate than we can imagine. In fact, many parts of it are still theoretical today. We've seen papers that tout the building of the ATP molecules in our body, or how it deals with the development of the different aspects of healing, the sodium-potassium ion exchange that's required in cells These are technical terms. But even with all of that knowledge, people still aren't sure of exactly what's going on and how specific wavelengths of light interact with the body to promote healing. So we are just scratching the surface of knowledge in this field. One of the things that we know in the terms of physics is that when a photon, which is a light particle, when it strikes an atom, an electron is released. So for every photon that's absorbed by an atom, an electron is released. Well, when you say, well, doesn't that happen all the time with our lights that we have around us? Sunlight. It's quite strong, and that's true. It is, and it does, but our body is used to that. But when we localize more intense light at a specific area of the body, then many more electrons are released in that area, and that creates an action within a cell or a molecule. And it's that action that causes a stimulation. It's more like we might massage somebody. We know that massaging will cause blood flow to increase. The circulation increases. It relaxes and soothes. Similarly, light can do the same thing. How many of us have just gone out and laid on the beach or laid out in the sun and just enjoyed what was happening to us at the time without realizing what's really going on? But if we can do that and increase the amount of output in certain areas, then we cause a reaction. Now, if we can be more specific about those reactions, then we can become ahead of the game. And this is one of the things that we did in our development was, I mentioned before, the UCLA Harbor Medical Center work using different types of laser, different wavelengths of laser. And what we did in our patent was to combine two forms of light which covered many wavelengths. It's a relatively narrow band, but it cost a whole lot less because it wasn't laser, and gives a more of a choice for the cells to absorb different wavelengths, because some cells will absorb one wavelength of light better than another. So we're serving up a veritable smorgasbord of wavelengths for the cells to react to and give them a better chance of covering a larger spectrum of cell coverage to produce a reaction. There have been ways that we'll discuss later of how we can even target different cells more specifically. And when we do that, then I think you'll begin to more understand the importance of light in the body, and as it relates to therapeutic applications. If you have a jaundiced baby that's born, they place it under blue light, a specific wavelength, and that wavelength then corrects that problem within the body. And that's what we want to do, even if we don't understand always exactly what's happening. And there's a lot to be learned. This wavelength is important. The amount of light is important. And how it's specifically applied, when it's applied, and the amount of power there is behind it. Light, as we said, is a particle, but it's also a wavelength. It's one of the least understood things of science. that it has two properties at the same time. When I was in industry, in the space program, we had a space guidance system that we were developing, and in part of that testing, we would take pictures of what was happening inside a vacuum jar. And so to reflect the light, we'd put a piece of tinfoil inside the vacuum system. And when we took the flash picture, the tinfoil fell over. We thought that was just a balancing act. It just happened that way that time. So we set it up and did it again, and it fell over again. This property of light showed, as we later measured the force, that a particle coming from the flash tube of the particles of light had enough intensity to actually move a piece of aluminum foil. It wasn't the heat, because in a vacuum there's no transfer of heat. It could only be the movement of the particle. Later, much later, then this theory was used to produce what they call solar wind sails for propelling spacecraft in space, just using the light particles from the sun to drive the craft. So even with what we don't know, we're understanding more all the time of the interaction of light with the body. But we're proud to use the things we do know to put together devices that can be of benefit to the body when used therapeutically.
Now, Dan, you had said earlier that the laser was a condensed beam, and the laser, L-A-C-E-R, is different. Explain the difference between the two.
Yes, and be glad to. The two things with the laser was, the laser is a collimated beam of monochromatic light. Now, technology came along. What was nice about the laser, you got a lot of power in a small area. But there were two things that were detrimental there. One, the laser could, if strong enough, burn. It could be detrimental. It could burn the skin. But when the technology came in developing LED, light-emitting diodes, that could put out enough energy that it would stimulate the cells the same as a laser would, but also do it over a wide spectrum of light.
So it's more of a diffuse
come
light.
out, well, it's wide spectrum in the actual wavelength of the light, but it come out, instead of coming out at a collimated beam, it came out at an angle that was such that there wasn't strong enough in any one area to cause damage. But yet the total power would be more than adequate to stimulate cell activity.
Okay. And now on the light equipment that you now have, you're using two different types of diodes, is that correct?
Yes.
And they are?
They are red in the spectrum, and they are centered around the area of 635 nanometers. But they produce a relatively narrow spectrum, but it isn't a single wavelength.
Okay.
The infrared is centered at 880 nanometers, which you cannot see, but the spectrum of light runs from 730 to 930 nanometers. And this is what is referred to as kind of a smorgasbord for cells, because different cells absorb different wavelengths of light more efficiently. But you add the red, while the properties of the red are absorbed right at the surface. The light is absorbed very quickly because of the blood and water that's there. But the infrared is able to penetrate that stuff and go on to deeper things like bone and tendons. The tissues that are more dense.
So you can go further
They'll
into
go
the body.
further into the body with infrared.
Okay.
So that's why the use of both.
Okay. When we come back, we're going to discuss Dr. Paul Noget and the frequencies that he developed and how we're being used in today's modern technology to improve upon even what we just talked about there for faster healing. We'll be right back.
Are you in pain? Then meet the doctor. Neck pain, headaches? Meet the doctor. Low back and leg pain? Meet the doctor. Arm, shoulder, and hand pain? Carpal tunnel syndrome? Meet the doctor. Injured in an auto accident? Meet Dr. James Bissland at Bissland Chiropractic, where you can get your first visit free this month. Call Bissland Chiropractic at 838-4252. Bissland Chiropractic.
Where were you when the lights went out? Who did you call and when you gave them a shout? Did they pick up the phone? Did you get a machine or some front office drone? You know what I mean. You wanna talk to somebody who knows what they're talking about. So call Marie now. Electricians with a mission will get you connected with Marie Electric.
Hi, this is Larry Murray with Murray Electric. We appreciate your business and we don't take you for granted. While nobody likes to have electrical problems, we want you to know that we will be here for you when you do need an electrician. And remember, you don't get phone shuffle when you call Murray Electric, because we have a real live electrician that answers the telephone. Remember, if you're in a hurry, call Murray, 918-835-9605. 918-835-9605.
We'll get you connected with Marie Electric.
Okay, welcome back to Health and Information. We've been talking with Dan Parris about the healing effects of light, and I wanted to show you a book, and we're going to talk a little about this. This is called The Healing Energy of Heat and Light by Charles McGee. He's an MD. This book is available on Amazon.com, and I understand, and I've read through this several times, but I understand, Danny, that there are 2 chapters in this book that are you're in it.
Pretty much tells
your life story.
My life story as far as
so your autobiography is in
goes.
this
Right.
book. Yeah. But this, as I said, is available on Amazon. Anybody who would like to read it, I know several of my patients who have read it have. Some of them sit here and read it while they're on therapy. That's why we have this one sitting in our therapy room. But it gives you a really good indication of how the body responds, and it kind of leads us into the next topic that I want to get into, and that is we've been talking about the wavelengths and how the body absorbs those and helps the body to heal by using specific wavelengths. But there's even a more powerful way of getting that stimulation to help heal. Is that correct?
That's very true.
Tell us about the frequencies and how how you got involved with them and where they came from.
Okay. It all began with Dr. Paul Noget that we referenced earlier. He was a physician in France who developed and was the father of auricular therapy. He didn't really call it acupuncture.
No, he did not.
And his big discovery was he used electro in the beginning, pulsed at specific frequencies at different locations in the ear that he called zonal areas at different frequencies would affect different parts of the anatomy, and both in diagnostics and treatment. For lack of a better way of describing it, I'll do it like he did. You view the ear as an inverted fetus, and that is the body and the different areas from the head at the lobe of the ear to the big toe at the top of the ear, then he had defined empirically the frequency that would stimulate those zonal areas. And he was having a lot of good results from it, and the therapy spread within the United States. But everybody used the frequencies, but no one was real sure of how they came about. Then he went to a LED output that had different frequencies, but it turned out these were all harmonics of his original frequencies. In other words, if he used 10 in an area, then the harmonic of it would be 100, 1,000, would be multiples, exact multiples, or doubling, or going up in an octave. Turns out these frequencies, I never found out until after I'd been using them for several years, these frequencies were actually musical notes. And how they applied to different areas was just a real mystery. But as I said before, when I made the lasers and later the lasers using infrared LED light, then we put them out with different veterinarians and asked them to report their results and what frequency they use for what problem, and they've become coming back with all similar results, that we begin to see that the frequency was as important as any aspect of the light that we could see. Yes, there was a stimulation that took place from the physics or the physical effect of the light on cells, but you could be more specific by pulsing that light at specific frequencies, would stimulate different types of cells. So we had a couple of university studies that were afforded us, and sure enough, what we wanted to find out was there any difference on a specific type of cell when you exposed it to a light pulse at this frequency, this frequency, at this frequency. Nogier's frequencies were 7 different frequencies. We had that ability to produce all 7 of those frequencies with the device that was given to the university, and they found out, yes, with a specific type of cell, they could affect the replication rate anywhere from 4 to 36 times with the application of a specific frequency to that group of cells, where another frequency almost next to it would have virtually no effect. Another one would have some effect, and some a little lower, and others, like I said, none. So we knew then that we were on to something, that this was really true, that the bigger effect from the light was the frequency at which it was pulsed. The light itself was just something that would give a stimulation to a cell. If I can take a tuning fork and I strike it, it'll vibrate. But it takes a lot of energy in that strike to cause it to vibrate. But if I place that tuning fork in the presence of the sound of the same frequency, it picks up energy from that and vibrates itself enough that you could hear it just from the sound waves that were hitting it at that same frequency. It's like if we take a cell and view it as a swing that your child is on. Every time that swing comes back, you put a little energy into it. And when it comes back again, you put a little more energy into it. You keep it swinging at that same rate with just a little bit of help at the right timing. The same with a clock. The clock takes just a little bit of energy to keep that time going. The little crystals that's in them takes a little bit of energy to keep them vibrating at the right frequency so the clock tells the correct time. So if we can take energy from light and stimulate a cell at its natural resonant frequency, everything in nature has its own resonance. You've seen Ella Fitzgerald sing the high note and break the glass in the old commercials. Is it real or is it Memorex? Memorex tape recording. And you'd see that crystal break when from that sound of that frequency, causing so much vibration to increase that it would come apart. Oh, we don't want to do that with the cell, but it's the same effect. So if we can take the resonant frequency of a cell and we can stimulate it with light by pulsing it at the same rate at which it's vibrating, then we can put energy in that cell so that it can do the job better than it is capable of in its own environment, which may be traumatized and being robbed of its ability to gather energy from the body itself. So when you have trauma in an area, if we can then stimulate it with light at a proper frequency, then that cell energy is increased and it can better do the job that it's supposed to be doing. That's what makes this so important, the frequency. And this used to be a theory, but now the actual vibratory rate of a cell has been measured. And let me say this before I get any further. If I'm learning music, am I learning about music from an infant on? Babies are soothed by music. Animals are soothed by music. Plants are even stimulated to grow with music, it's been shown. Do we learn to appreciate music, or do we like music because it's in tune with the natural frequencies within our body? And that's whenever they measured that first cell actual vibratory rate, here's the way it was described. They said, and the frequency at which that cell vibrated, if we could amplify it and listen to it, then it would be about a D sharp above middle C. When I heard that, I wanted to shout, yes! Because all the frequencies that we use and Noger use are precise musical notes.
I heard it stated at one point that during development, embryological development, that the only thing that separates the three embryological layers are the resonance of which those tissues naturally vibrate.
That's what I've heard.
And so when a tissue, either as a young tissue or as an adult, a mature tissue, when a tissue is out of resonance, that's when we start to see misalignments or dysfunctions.
It's which comes first, the chicken or the egg?
Exactly.
Do you have a disturbance that causes the resonance to change, or do you have a resonance change that causes disturbance?
Right.
It can be both ways, but it depends upon the origin, what occurs first.
But either way,
You-
we can retune the tissue back to its normal, natural resonance, and it will function better in that
Exactly.
normal resonance than it will if it's out of tune.
Exactly.
Kind of like a piano string that is not tuned. Every time you hit that key, that string is going to give you a sour note.
Right. And that brings up another interesting point about being something that's bred within us, these frequencies. You can take somebody that's really tone deaf. They couldn't sing a note. And then, but you get somebody that hits a sour note and they know it.
They know, absolutely.
Because it's not natural to them.
Now, when we're talking about the frequencies, the Dr. Noget, who, as you know, my father knew from back in the early 70s, mid 70s, when they did the auriculotherapy programming over in training in France. But one of the things that Dr. Noget always talked about was that the body had to have a natural frequency to stay healthy. And so we're using light as the vehicle to get the stimulation into the body.
Exactly. It's just something that the body will respond to.
Because it's a natural.
There's the actual physical effect, as I said before, when an atom, which all the molecules are made up of many atoms, but when an atom absorbs a photon, then it releases an electron, and this starts a reaction.
So as we move forward now, what's coming down the road as far as light therapy technology? Is there anything new?
I think the identification of different frequencies for different cellular activity and different molecules will be the key that opens up more. It'll remind us of Star Wars and the Dr. Spock's tricorder and healing device. Who knows? One day we may be there.
Could very well be. You know, before we finish up here, you had made a comment earlier that I would like you to explain a little bit. You said that you didn't necessarily believe in acupuncture.
Yes. First of all, I've always had a scientific mind. I had to be able to rationalize anything. And I couldn't rationalize acupuncture because I didn't know enough about it. And didn't have the experience, personal experience myself. But when I went to see Dr. Marvin King, who bought that first laser unit for acupuncture, he invited me into his office, or into his treatment room, had a dog come in that was paralyzed. And he started sticking needles in that dog and electrode to it, and we was talking with the little couple, the little German couple that was there, the elderly couple, and while he give acupuncture treatment to the dog, and there the dog is being treated, and it's an old schnauzer. And when he gets through, he probably 20 minutes, 30 minutes later, he takes the needles out, and the dog was unable to stand. You couldn't sit him up. He wouldn't wag his tail. But he picked the dog up. The dog stood there. He put it down in the floor, and it started running around the feet of the owners. And they started tearing up and crying. And I started tearing up too. And my thoughts was, this really works. You don't fool that dog.
No.
That dog only reacted to what had happened to him. And so I was a believer at that point from there on.
I don't know who made the statement in a seminar that, and I was young when this statement was made, and my father might have made it for all I remember, but he said that you can't give a placebo to an animal.
I believe that too.
Yeah. It may have been you that said it. I don't know. So as we move forward now, light therapy, we're using the red and the infrared for most human and animal use now. Is that correct?
Yes.
Is there a specific reason why we use the that rather than, let's say, white or blue?
Is the best answer I can give is that these are the ones that we know most about and know have a cause and effect from. It may be wide open. It's the different wavelengths and for sure different frequencies.
We know the frequencies.
Right.
That we know for a fact. Well, Dan, thank you for your time.
It's
thank you
been
for
my
being
pleasure.
here. I appreciate it. And if any of you have any questions on anything that you've heard on the program today, you can email them to me and I will get them to Dan, and if I can't answer them, and give an answer to you. You can see our email address and our address and phone number on the screen. And you always feel free to call us at 918-838-4252, and we can have information sent to you. We do have packets of information that we can give to our patients as well as our colleagues, anybody who has an interest in learning more about the light therapy. And if you'd like to order Dr. McGee's book on the healing with heat and light, Amazon.com has those available. So again, if you need information on the name or title or author of that book, you can call our office and we'll provide that for you. Thank you for joining us this month. We hope that the information that you got was helpful in some way. And we look forward to seeing you next month. Our scheduled guest again is Lieutenant Commander Jim Bridenstine, who is the Republican candidate for the United States Congress from District 1 here in Oklahoma. Have a very happy, healthy, and safe month. I'm Dr. James Bissland. We'll see you next time.
Are you in pain? Then meet the doctor. Neck pain, headaches? Meet the doctor. Low back and leg pain? Meet the doctor. Arm, shoulder, and hand pain? Carpal tunnel syndrome? Meet the doctor. Injured in an auto accident? Meet Dr. James Bissland at Bissland Chiropractic, where you can get your first visit free this month. Call Bissland Chiropractic at 838-4252. Bissland Chiropractic.
Where were you when the lights went out? Who did you call and when you gave them a shout? Did they pick up the phone? Did you get a machine or some front office drone? You know what I mean. You wanna talk to somebody who knows what they're talking about. So call Marie now. Electricians with a mission will get you connected. We're Murray Electric.
Hi, this is Larry Murray with Murray Electric. We appreciate your business and we don't take you for granted. While nobody likes to have electrical problems, we want you to know that we will be here for you when you do need an electrician. And remember, you don't get phone shuffle when you call Murray Electric, because we have a real live electrician that answers the telephone. Remember, if you're in a hurry, call Murray, 918-835-9605. 918-835-9605.
We'll get you